Yeah, it's kind of funny. So, Keith, you had an article.
Alrighty, so if we hadn't had all this like election brouhaha, I think this would have actually, at least in religious circles, had been a bigger story. But this was Pope Francis's kind of half endorsement of same-sex civil unions back in October. So to set the stage here, I have an article from American Magazine about this. But in a new documentary that premiered in Rome yesterday, Pope Francis appeared to endorse civil unions for same-sex couples for the first time as Pope. As portrayed in the documentary, the Pope says homosexual people have the right to be in a family. They are children of God and have a right to a family. Nobody should be thrown out or made miserable over it. What we have to have is a civil union law. That way we are legally covered. I support that. And so it goes on, and there was kind of, a somewhat half-hearted walking back from the Vatican about, the officialness of this and, comments about leaked videos being taken out of context. But there also is the history of Pope Francis actually endorsing civil unions as an alternative to same-sex marriage, back in Argentina. And as later in the article, it kind of asks the question and tries to answer: does this change church teaching and doctrine? And obviously, the Pope isn't, it's not exactly an ex cathedra statement when the Pope is talking in an interview on a documentary. But where was the thing I wanted to read here? Oh, dang, I can't find it. Basically, it was talking about, kind of the difference between here's doctrine, here is what the Catholic Church teaches on same-sex marriage, for instance, and here is how we interact in a society with people who believe different things, and kind of trying to draw this fine line between the two. And what kind of spoke to me is just thinking about, I think this cuts to lots of things, not just same-sex marriage per se, but when we talk about an imperfect pluralistic society, and we talk about trying to make sure people have certain fundamental rights, marriage in the U.S. Isn't just recognizing that these two people are married. It kind of often confers health insurance, basically your access to health care in the way this system is set up. It confers, has a huge implications on your finances, and all sorts of things. And what it kind of sounds to me like is an erring on the side of permissiveness when there's a real serious risk of more very fundamental human rights being violated. Is it so? Instead of this whole kind of no quarter approach that's been pretty common in conservative Christian circles, to where we're not going to we're going to protest anything that acknowledges, some kind of humanity in homosexual persons. It's saying, hey, we're going to, we know if we're more permissive here, yes, people according to our beliefs will be sinning, but it's better to be more permissive and to allow people to have access to health care, access to certain privileges that spouses have, and end of life issues, not to be penalized by their taxes, to be able to live with people, to have fair access to housing, things like that. That we can draw that line between the two, that we can have our beliefs about the moral quality of something, but still allow it because we need to protect these, make sure these people aren't disadvantaged in really fundamental ways.
Go ahead, Nate. I know you have some words on this.
Oh, no.
Well, because I know for a fact from, at least in Ohio, I know that Pope Francis took some heat for this. I know he did because I heard the trad side of Catholicism speaking against him directly. They actually...
Loudly.
Yes. And we have some trads at our parish, and they did say certain things about this. Again, I am a staunch supporter of our Holy Father. I love Pope Francis. I think he's done so much good for the church. I don't begin to say anything ill about him. And I think he's done more to help progress the church than probably the last 5 popes, to be honest. And I love them all. They've done great jobs in their own capacity, but Pope Francis, in my opinion, has done so much for our age. It's hard to compare. I mean, he's taken the poor. I mean, he himself, I think, is a beautiful example of taking care of the poor. You're talking about a man who doesn't even live inside of the Pope's quarters. He lives in the servants' quarters in the Vatican, who walked to Vatican City instead of taking a limousine, who sold his first-class ticket and gave the rest to charity, who has removed more people from the church who are not doing it any good than any other pope before him. So, yeah, I am actually a staunch supporter of the Holy Father. So,
So before this, Keith, what was the church's stance, on same-sex marriage? Because I'm assuming that it was just don't do it.
No. There's only one kind of marriage.
yeah.
And in particular, when we talk about civil unions, as in like recognizing a pairing of the people for the purposes of civil government benefits.
Yeah.
There is a statement from a 2003 document from the Congregation for the Doctrine of the Faith, which is a big Catholic thing, stating that respect for homosexual persons cannot lead in any way to approval of homosexual behavior or lead to the legal recognition of homosexual unions. So that does seem to at least semi-conflict with what Pope Francis is saying. There is some argument in here, I'm trying to find it, that argues that, hey, maybe there is some opening for a recognition of the legal benefit without condoning the moral component of it.
Yeah, I mean, but that also
tricky.
That interview also goes back to his time in Argentina. It's actually not a recent event that we're talking about.
Yeah, he supported it back there.
Yeah,
Right.
And mind you, he did that to keep the church out of it. To let the state step in and regulate what they're going to regulate without the church having to step in to regulate themselves or being forced to do something that is against, our own catechism.
Yeah, I think, you're not going to see, kind of one of the big deals of the Catholic Church is that when, she teaches something authoritatively, she's never supposed to go back onto it. The church can elaborate, clarify, but, the church kind of is, it ceases to be what we believe the Catholic Church is if it says, up is down and then down is up the next day. It can't go from saying this is a sin and this is not a sin, but I think there's a lot of room in there to take a shift in tone. And this is, I feel like a lot of Pope Francis's encyclicals go into this, is while, not stepping over actual doctrine or dogma, they are saying, hey, we need to take a different approach to this. We can't just go hard after like abortion at all costs, that kind of thing. That we actually have to have some nuance in here in order to actually appeal to people and to, be winsome in the culture and also just not to fundamentally trample over other fundamental human rights. If we go hard after there can be no quarter for same-sex marriage or, for transgender people or whatever, and in the process we deny them healthcare, food, housing, all these things, are we being Catholic?
Right.
And this funny, this is not a big deal in the scheme of things, but right as this happened, this came in the news, there was actually a point where, kind of with a lot of these issues, it's you go from maybe being outspokenly conservative, maybe years ago, which I was, to kind of just being quiet about it, and to maybe, speaking out on the other side of it. And this was coincidentally, I had willed myself at this point to actually say out loud the words trans rights or human rights. And this was, in a particular context or whatever, but it occurred to me that there's all these fundamental rights that we are ignoring if we just, all we talk about is the way these people are not living up to the standards of the church or God. And if we we can acknowledge a whole host of human rights for people that don't follow our church's teachings without, without condoning the part that they don't follow. Because I mean, I'm jumping a little bit here, but I'm thinking back to a Catholic Twitter debate this week about ectopic pregnancies, and I don't want to go too much into that because I don't want to really trigger people, I should say.
A Catholic Twitter debate. Nice.
There's people talking about this moral certainty about, the principle of double effect and all these things and how they apply to taking care of very serious issues in pregnancy with women's health that will cost both, the life of the child and could cost the life of the mother if they're not treated in a certain way. Okay. And there's people adhering to a very hardline stance and saying that, the church says you can't do this. You have to, you have to only indirectly kill the child, and you can't use this particular drug, and you have to take out the fallopian tube. That's the only way you can treat this. And then you're reading the actual document and you're realizing, like, oh wait, that some theologians say this. Other theologians say this using this particular drug is okay. It's not actually killing the child. And it's like, I had never, in just listening to like, Catholic Answers or a lot of conservative-leaning apologetics, I had never heard that perspective before. So how can we say, hey, legislate our faith in all these very precise medical conditions or conditions very specific to how policy affects people who believe differently when we don't even have like cut and dry doctrine about these nuances? And that whole thing just made me think back to like Ohio has been a hotbed for abortion restriction legislation, like those kind of things that a state legislature pushes through just to challenge Roe v. Wade. And a lot of these things will say things that are medically impossible or tone deaf to a wide variety of medical conditions. Like there was one that said that you could only terminate an ectopic, or you could only you had to reimplant an ectopic pregnancy inside the uterus, which is a medically impossible procedure. We have no way to do that. And there was law in the state of Ohio, or a bill they were trying to pass, that said you have to do this as a doctor or you can be held accountable for murder.
Ouch.
Wow.
So I think this is a strong case for erring on some side of permissiveness, where we're not going to try to push for our morality and our faith to be echoed perfectly in legislation, because that could cause very serious consequences. I mean, because it depends on, number one, whose faith. Is it a particular fundamentalist church's teaching, or is it one particular interpretation of Catholicism? And this could trample over a whole lot of things that are actually perfectly allowed in our faith.
Hey, Keith.
Mm-hmm.
Tell us how you really feel.
So you feel that the Pope doing this, it's a balanced decision. It's balanced.
Yeah.
Everything my Pope does is balanced.
Thank you. Thank you. Because he's not saying that, oh yeah, okay, throw up the rainbow flags. He's not proclaiming things. What he's saying is we need to take care of people while proclaiming the gospel.
But I'm sure that there are conservative Catholics who are like, no, now we're slipping one step closer to
everywhere.
Yeah.
Especially here in the U.S.
Right.
Yeah, especially on the trad side.
It's a more pontifical way of staying. So forever people have been railing against Father Jim Martin, who wrote a book called Building a Bridge, and it's a talking about engaging with the LGBTQ community. And people are talking, this book is evil. It's all these things. And I went and read the book, and the thrust of the book is like, don't be a jerk to gay people.
Yeah.
You know what? It's funny you say that, because his name was demonized by several different presentations I had heard. Mm-hmm. And not from my parish. It was actually on YouTube, of course. But you're right. But then
Universal Parish.
Yeah. But then I actually went back and said, you know what? Let me hear him in his own words. And I was like, he didn't say anything that wasn't canon. So
right.
Where was the problem?
I think he tweaks a lot of people by stepping right over the line, which is in the same way that Pope Francis maybe does in a different, nuance of it, but doesn't. I can't say he steps over it.
Yeah. I mean,
I will say he has advocated, I think, don't quote me, sorry, Father, if this isn't correct, but I'm pretty sure he has said he thinks that the catechism's wording about gay people should be changed from disordered to differently ordered.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think that the church could reasonably do, because that would obviously be saying something totally different.
Yeah, I can see that.
Right. No, I agree.
Beyond that, yeah, he doesn't really say much that's crazy.
No.
People say he does.
Yeah, no.
Do you agree with that, Nate?
With what? That they're differently ordered?
Yeah.
No.
I mean, they are differently ordered.
Well, yeah.
The point is that the other order is not the optimal or natural or intended. Intended is a tricky word, but yeah, if you were to say different, that implies, that they're both good, which the catechism is saying the opposite.
Right. To his credit, though, in his presentations, he did explicitly say, I am speaking to celibate Catholics. So he did go so far as to explain who he was speaking about, and he did say celibate Catholics, which that's not wrong. If you have a problem, but you're abstaining from the problem, then that actually is not a problem then. So, to his credit, that is what he said.
Keith, when you referenced the laws here in Ohio changing towards abortion, were you talking about DeWine's legislation to women who have an abortion have to legally bury their unborn fetuses?
I don't know all that's in that, but not necessarily that. I'm talking more about the stuff that's usually died in committee so far. These are the really aggressive pushes from the far right in Ohio, which is in a whole other subject, is some of the dumbest people we have in America.
I was pretty shocked when I saw that one.
But like there's some of the stuff where it's been the various pushes to pass something, like probably, and this is an indictment on how crazy some of the stuff is. The most reasonable one has been the Fetal Heartbeat Law, which even several bishops in various localities have objected to because it's a really just ham-fisted attempt to try to overturn Roe v. Wade. But yeah, there's just a lot of legislation that tries to outlaw abortion but doesn't provide any sort of escape hatch for it could be very easy to prosecute someone for having a miscarriage, that kind of stuff. It's a very, very, very clumsy language that is ripe for abuse, and especially considering what kind of future or non-future this kind of legislation has, I think, or I should say, if you're going to try to pass something to challenge Roe v. Wade, at least be thorough. I mean, this stuff, even if it doesn't pass, even if it never actually directly harms somebody, it harms the pro-life movement because it makes you look like a bunch of idiots. But if it did pass, it could be legitimately used to harm women who aren't having abortions, at least per what doctrine would say. What is abortion?
I mean, there's a hard argument on both sides, for and against, and that's where people have to realize it's not one party or the other. It's not like, well, the Republicans are good and Democrats are bad. There are good people on both sides. There are pro-life Democrats, and there's also pro-choice Republicans. So you have to realize that there are good people on both sides. As an example, the Roe versus Wade bill that was passed by a Republican Senate. So that should give you an idea of just how badly these things can pass through. So it was majority Republican that passed it. So there are good people on both sides. We need to support our ideals for our own theology, Christian, Catholic, not the parties that we think are going to pass what we want them to pass. And that's where the problem lies. The Democrats aren't good. The Republicans aren't good. Yeah. But there's good people on both sides of it.
And we have to differentiate between people who, maybe they say your policy position, but they they use it mostly as a fundraising vehicle. And that's where I think a lot of this pro-life legislation that happens in the Ohio state legislature and other legislatures to challenge Roe v. Wade comes from, is it's an awesome fundraising vehicle. If you're the person who in committee is putting forth a super restrictive abortion ban, no exceptions, you're going to get Ohio Right to Life, Cleveland Right to Life, whoever, you're going to get them fundraising on your behalf, just singing your praises in all their newsletters. And ultimately, that's all it's ultimately going to do, because it's not going to pass or do anything. You're accomplishing your own self-promotion.
Yeah,
absolutely.
And those are the people who, I think that's been a big problem in the pro-life movement, is that grifting onto these people who that's really all they're doing.
Yeah.
I was thinking about that earlier today. Like sometimes I just want to ask hardcore Republican people, especially far-right extremists, like, can you name any politician that you support that has actually like caused a net decrease in abortions? I don't know the statistics myself, but like I imagine, like, have any of the stuff that you support, you know, you're marching, you're donating, you're politicking, has any of it led to a reduction in abortions? If not, rethink your strategy. Like, maybe
some of the statistics suggest we have a net increase, or at least an increase relative to previous administrations in the last 4 years.
Yeah.
And that would suggest
pro-lifeiest president ever.
Right, exactly. That would suggest that the pro-life strategies currently in place do not, in fact, reduce abortion. Yeah. Like, if voting for Democrats reduces abortion, shouldn't you vote for Democrats? I'm not saying that it does, but like, shouldn't you be doing whatever you have to do to reduce abortions if that's really what you're about? Maybe it's not about supporting these politicians and movements that you're so attached to.
Yeah. No, that's a valid point. It's a very valid point. Yeah. Since we're on the subject, I'm going to go ahead and bring this up because I thought that Cardinal Timothy Dolan out of New York did a beautiful job explaining this. So it's here. It says, has explained why Catholics are not ashamed of being hung up on abortion, especially in the context of the upcoming Biden administration, in a Wednesday column, recalling a conversation with a politician who asked him, "Why are you Catholics so hung up about abortion?" The Archbishop of New York explained in a January 13th column at Catholic New York that actually we're obsessed with the dignity of the human person and the sacredness of all human life. Yes, the innocent, helpless life of the baby in the womb, but also the life of the death row prisoner, the immigrant, the fragile elderly, the poor, and the sick. As a matter of fact, Cardinal Dolan says, this is not uniquely Catholic issues at all, but one of human rights. We didn't learn that abortion was horrible in a religion class, but in biology, and our courses on the inalienable rights tradition in American history. How can we sustain a culture that recoils at violence, exclusion, suicide, racism, injustice, and callousness toward those in need if we applaud, allow, pay for, and promote the destruction of the most helpless, the baby in the womb? Cardinal Dolan also writes that pro-abortionists reassured us 48 years ago that abortion will be kept safe, legal, and rare. So much for the reassurances, we have hardly gotten used to it. Abortion remains the hottest issue in our politics, with polls showing that most Americans want restrictions on its unquestionable use and do not want their taxes to pay for it. We've even more hung up now as our new president, whom we wish well, and who speaks with admirable sensitivity about protecting the rights of the weakest and most threatened, ran on a platform avidly supporting this gruesome capital punishment for innocent preborn babies. We're all still cringing from this disturbing violence last week in Washington. This upheaval was made the more nauseating as it was seemingly encouraged by the ones sworn to uphold the Constitution and the rule of law, and because it trashed the very edifice designed to be sanctuary of safety, reason, civility, and decorum, the cardinal added. He finally praised President Joe Biden for reminding us that the rampage we saw was not American, and concluding by asking if we can hope that violence will subside and that the sacredness of all life and the dignity of the human person will be revived and the sanctuary of the womb will be off limits to violent invasion.
Oof.
Trash.
What's that?
Trash. I hate it.
Tasted lukewarm to me.
That's a tough one.
Like, who is this we that he's talking about? And this isn't just his statement that's trash, but most of the bishops who spoke on it. Like, who is we? Like, he says Americans don't support the unquestioned use of abortion. Okay, he's talking about a conservative portion of America.
He is.
And then when he says we later, he's using it to, like, exclude, the other half of Americans. Like, he's doing the whole search for peace when there is no peace stuff, and I hate it, and I always hate it. 'Cause at the end of the day, he's still pushing a party line, and still is not acknowledging the fact that, like, his own actions encouraged the far right foolishness within the Catholic Church specifically.
He's been awfully buddy-buddy.
And he's been criticized about it from the day he started doing it, and now when the shit hits the fan, sorry, he's like, it takes no personal responsibility.
Wait.
And basically pinned it on Trump.
There were some things I agreed with.
10-second swear fest, what?
And some things I didn't agree with. I mean, one of the things I definitely agree with is that it drives me nuts whenever, I talk to Republicans or somebody, on the right, and we're talking about, and this was back during, like, the Bush's times. I can't remember which Bush. But
they kind of blend.
Yeah. And this was literally in church we're talking, right? I think I was finishing up doing music or something, and the whole issue of politics came up and who I'm voting for. I'm like, I'm not voting for either of these jokers. I don't care for any of them.
Yeah.
And
right.
He was like, how can you not vote for Bush? I mean, aren't you pro-life? And I'm like, what?
That's that carrot.
Oh, my God. It drives me nuts. I knew I was going to hit a brick wall if I went any further. And I'm like, how can you say that man is pro-life? I mean, this man is okay with dropping bombs all over the world in the name of making money and in the name of defeating terrorism, whoever we designate as a terrorist. But just because he claims he's pro-life here and is against, abortion in word, you're going to vote for him. It makes no sense to me. So I don't buy it.
And Cardinal Dola had the nerve to say violent white supremacy is not American. Like, what? which history book have you been in?
That's the other piece I didn't agree with.
Yeah.
I mean, like, I don't really know what America he speaks of.
Well,
it's a political.
Yeah.
It's a political statement.
Let's take this current administration before it changes hands, right? I had a evangelical person, I'll leave names out of it and associations, but standing up saying, why can't you support Trump? I mean, look, he signed new articles protecting, people from abortion. And I said, okay, well, hold on. Do you understand that he also took away every tax benefit for orphans and gave it to trust fund kids? Did you see that? Did you see the fact that he took away funding for Medicare and Medicaid for our elderly and gave it to the rich?
Yeah.
I mean, Did you see that he executed 13 people for the first time in 16 years within 6 months?
Right, exactly. So they take that one carrot, pro-life, and then they do everything against everybody else, but it's okay because he signed off on pro-life. And I'm not okay with that. I'm not okay with that.
Because it's trash.
Yeah.
It makes me think of another part of Bob Woodard's Rage book. This is the part that's boring, but it's also illuminating, where he's just talking over and over, with in the interviews with Trump about the virus, and then about Black Lives Matter over the summer, and he's kind of egging the president on, trying to get him to answer a certain way, and the president is not doing it, because he's trying to say like what would you say to Black Lives Matter protesters, if they're right here and you want them to understand that you empathize with them, and he just keeps, no matter how many different ways he rephrases the question to try to get President Trump to make some emotional connection with those who face systemic racism. He just keeps rattling off his accomplishments. He's like, we've had the best job growth for minorities ever. I got tons of money for historically black colleges and universities. I got opportunity zones. He just keeps repeating these little token things. And like when you look at them, when you think, what made me think of this is mentioning like that pro-life executive statement, which does nothing. It's not worth the paper it's printed on. He talks about all these token things, and I think of Mackenzie Scott, Jeff Bezos' ex-wife, who just did a bunch of donations to HBCUs, and like not saying like that she solved all the world's problems, but she probably did more right there as a private citizen than Trump did with anything he signed.
Exactly. Exactly.
She gave $20 million to my HBCU that
Nice.
I attend. So.
Well, and on the conservative side, I have to completely condemn what they're saying when they're like, well, look, it was okay with the protest last summer. No, that is completely different. You're talking about over 4 centuries of something that needed to happen to open those scars up and let them heal. I mean, yes, did things happen that shouldn't have happened? Of course, there was things that happened. But that was something that had to happen to help the country heal. It was different than an attack on the Capitol because your president that you think won the election, who didn't win the election, is being
what
dethroned.
What you're protesting matters.
Yeah. The people protesting over the summer were protesting the kind of stuff like what happened on January the 6th. The people that committed a terrorist attack on January 6th did so because of lies.
Yeah.
Whereas the protests all year long before that were because of the truth that something like that could happen. It has happened.
Yeah.
And will continue to happen until people own up to it, which Catholic bishops in particular seem not to be able to do at this point. Like, how do you even bring up the George Floyd protests in a statement about the terrorist attack in D.C.? Like, what does it have to do? Like, even if they were related, what? It's not the subject of your statement. Why are you talking about it? But they gotta make peace, quote unquote.
Mm-hmm.
And
you gotta play
make
both
everybody
sides.
feel like they're
Yeah.
not the bad guy, or it's like, how about we for once, point out a bad guy.
Yeah, but
that's not, a communist takeover of the United States.
So to take it to a geek level, though, because I have to go there, right? So you take it to a geek level, that's like saying, well, yeah, but I really enjoy original Star Trek, and it's I think it's better than Discovery. How would you equate that to the prequels of Star Wars? It's two totally different things.
I was thinking the ssome thing.
Right?
Yeah.
It's like...
Wait, George isn't here. We can't have our debate about how good the Phantom Menace is.
That's right. But so I did take it to a very, very deep geek level. But you're talking about two totally different things.
You got to come up for air, brother. It's
two totally different things.
It's crazy because they are different. But then, like I said, they're actually connected in that the one protest was literally about the other protest.
Mm-hmm.
Like one is protesting a free and fair election, and the other is protesting people that would protest a free and fair election. Literally the same demographic of people.
I meant to bring this up earlier, but there was an interesting article. I'll fit it in now. I don't know what this guy's credentials are, but a fellow named Jacob Witten wrote an article on Medium about... He analyzed the congressional districts where the 140-odd congressmen who objected to certifying the results were from. And he found that, they're obviously predominantly suburban, exurban, rural. But in terms of like economic growth over the 20 years and demographic change, these are districts where everybody's done quite well. They've had a lot of population growth. They've actually had a lot of Hispanic and Black population growth, and the white people have done fine, but the rate of economic growth, the Black and Hispanic folks, they've been closing the gap on economic growth. So the white people are doing great, but relative to before then, the black and the Hispanic people were doing really good. So basically, this is like a white lash against people getting, the economic gaps closing.
Interesting.
That's really interesting.
I knew it was a conspiracy.
That's just American history repeating itself.
Over and over and over.
I mean, that's a Black Wall Street, but that's Tulsa, right?
Yeah.
That's the same thing. You have a group of prosperous black people, and the white people get mad. The white people are probably doing fine, but they get mad.
Did you say Tulsa?
Tulsa.
It happened all over the place. Tulsa, Greenwood, Roseville.
Is that the Red Summer? Is that what you're talking about, referring to?
I think it was that.
In 1919 or something?
Yeah, it's around then,
Yeah.
So it's interesting, some of the parallels to our times, isn't it?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I actually would like us to, and maybe Nate, maybe you and I will brainstorm on this. I would like to do a little bit of an expose on things like Greenwood, to bring it up, because it was actually the recent. Did you guys watch The Watchmen?
Oh, not yet.
Movie?
No, the movie, but the movie actually started a TV show. And the Watchmen TV show, which is on HBO Max.
Oh,
yeah. Get this, it's one of the few things that actually highlighted the events of what happened at Greenwood. And it's only been recently talked about because of that show.
Interesting.
And so it's a pop culture thing, but has anybody watched The Watchmen here besides myself?
No, not yet.
You're still pretty deep, brother.
All right, so
sounds like we have homework.
So The Watchmen is a movie. It goes back to 2013, I believe it came out.
Wait, I watched the movie.
Okay, yeah. So the movie is brilliant because it has superheroes in it, but it's not really about superheroes. It's really about society and the way that entities work in the background that form society. It's brilliantly written by Alan Moore. The TV show so far carries on in that vein beautifully. At the end of the movie, you're left scratching your head thinking, okay, was the bad guy actually a bad guy? And it really makes you reflect on your own morality, which is ultimately what it's supposed to do. So we really do have to sit down and do a deep search to go into the idea of things like Greenwood and bring it up and rehash it, because I think that most people would be surprised at what took place.
Yeah, the same reason that they're going to be surprised 50 years from now about the terrorist attack, because we're not going to call it that, and we're going to forget that it happened the way that it happened and why it happened.
Mm-hmm.
And
or why it keeps happening.
Yeah.
The bishops are going to whitewash it, the people are going to forget it, and that'll be that.
Yeah.
But if 2020 was anything, it was certainly a learning experience, even for me, because I didn't even know about the Red Summer until after everything happened with George Floyd, and I went to look back in our history, and I realized, I'm like, my God, we haven't grown at all before the Civil Rights Movement in the 60s. Like, we're talking about like after the First World War.
Yeah.
And there was a pandemic then too, actually, during that time.
Yeah.
But if I say it out loud, I'm a conspiracy theorist.
There is that myth that somehow we've moved on from racism just because we got a couple laws passed.
Not at all.
No.
Not at all. And honestly, we'll cover this in our conspiracy episode. Honestly, I think it's a way for powerful people to stay in power.
Yeah,
I really do. I really do. Because if you conquer and divide the people, you remain in power.
Yep.
So, and that's really what it comes down to. If I don't like black people, or I don't like Hispanic people, or if you divide the people, then powerful people stay in power. That's what it comes down to.
It's not hard.
Healthy dose of brainwashing too, which is how you write your history books, what you tell your kids.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, do you know how shocking it is when I show my kids what Jesus would have actually looked like?
This is a very low stakes thing, but it makes me think. When we think about people learning 50 years from now, I was thinking of this. So there's I think I don't know if Macaulay Culkin started it, but it's gone around online about the idea that they should edit Donald Trump out of Home Alone 2. So there's the one scene where he shows up in the hotel and Kevin McAllister runs into him. Yeah, of course, this is because he owned at the time the hotel that they did the filming in, and so he bullied his way into the movie. And people are like, they want to replace it with today's Macaulay Culkin, for instance, running into him. So how funny would it be for Macaulay Culkin to run into Macaulay Culkin? But I'm like, leave him in, because there are a ton of cultural reminders of Donald Trump in both our past media and obviously, even more recent stuff. We need people to watch these things and to remember that this guy bullied his way into everything. I mean, you just look at, Back to the Future 2 is about Donald Trump in large part. Sesame Street did several things about Donald Trump. Like, they actually made a Ronald Grump or something. I'm getting the name wrong, but they made a Grouch, an Oscar doppelganger who was basically Donald Trump and tried to take over the trash can complex.
Such irony. I love it.
We need to have students watching The Apprentice in history class 50 years from now so they can understand, get some idea what it was like to see this creeping in, this gradual acceptance of, totalitarianism, fascism into our culture. I mean, that's not the only antidote, but it's something we could do to remind people, like to kick us out of that whole, like, that could not possibly happen. That would just look ridiculous from the standpoint forward. Like, watch what really happened.
I mean, if the modern age brought nothing else forward, is the fact that it kind of puts the power back to the people. Because think about it. If this was 300 years ago, Donald Trump would be that reigning monarch over the Americas or over Europe and he would write his own history books about what a great conqueror he was.
We can preserve a lot more of this.
But in our modern culture, the one good thing that things like social media has done is it brings the power back to the people, because you can have some guy on TikTok who literally has more sway than the president. It's kind of reversing things. Mm-hmm. So, yes, there is a lot of evil in social media, but the good thing that has come out of it is it's kind of starting to take a little bit of the power away from the current powers.
I don't know.
There's a lot of ground there.
I would love to say that I'm optimistic about that theory, but I'm not. Because at the end of the day, the textbook is going to be written by, for example, Joe Biden, and it's not going to be in his best interest to suggest that the government is susceptible to a coup. So, I mean, it's not like we've made a ton of progress, but in the way that you describe it, yes, it is good that we have more ways to inform each other about what's really going on. But as far as, whether or not it's likely that history is going to repeat itself again, it's probably going to happen.
I can see both sides to it. Yeah. To me, it's Donald Trump represents the ugly side of that void in me as a human.
Yeah.
That when I look back at the Old Testament, when Moses came down from the mountain, how quick they were to worship other gods because they couldn't wait. We're going to want another Donald Trump. And however Biden turns out, we're going to want another Biden.
Yeah.
We can't help it.
Yeah.
We can't help it. And then because it's easy to blame Donald Trump. It'll be, and you know what? When the shit hits the fan with Biden, because things will.
It will.
We're going to blame Biden.
Well, he's going to do it to himself.
Because they're easy to blame. And
Yeah.
They're easy to. It just takes all the responsibility off of us to think that we actually have to do the things, to do the work.
Yeah. Again, I don't think Biden even knows where he's at right now, to be honest.
Well, even if we're talking about race relationships with different races, it was never up to Donald Trump to fix that.
Yeah.
It's about you and me here.
Yeah.
It's about me and my neighbor there.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? You can't legislate that.
No.
But it sure
But
is
like
easy
you said, people were going to listen, unfortunately, to the person in power, and that's who they're going to let form their conscience.
Of course,
Yeah.
that's what I'm saying. And so 2020 is like unimaginable revealer of something that's so empty within us.
Yeah.
And to me, that's the lack of not having God.
Oh, yeah. I agree. I'd say the miracle of the modern age is the fact that, well, for example, if this was even 50 years ago, we couldn't be having this conference right now.
Mm-hmm.
And that we can collaborate and bring this together remotely at that fast. I mean, I called poor Nate I think an hour and a half before we started, and we were able to pull this together that fast.
Yeah.
I think that is the beauty of the modern age. I mean, if it wasn't for our current social media and technology, we couldn't speak about the injustices done, right? So, and that's the beauty of this, is the fact that we can rise against the system to create the social justices that we need. We can't progress forward until we tackle those things, and I think that all of us collectively are doing our part to do that. Well, the only last thing that I had, do you want to go over your article?
It doesn't matter to me. Nate, do you got something?
I've got endless things. What are you talking about?
So let's do this, because I know that Gumby had this beautiful article about the Pope.
Yeah, but it's about the Pope.
Yeah, go ahead.
Man, the Pope. My Pope.
Yeah, that's right. Go ahead.
I don't really care. I think it's a great article.
Go ahead.
If you don't think we've
No.
pulled too much.
No. Let's go ahead and tackle it, because I love the fact that this is coming from an evangelical Christian.
Yeah.
So
I wish some more evangelical leaders could do this.
Yeah. Please
All
go.
right, here we go. So the name of the article is Pope Francis partners with corporate titans to make capitalism more inclusive and fair. Is this for real, or is it just corporate virtue signaling? Pope Francis, aware of the fast-growing global wealth inequality between the ultra-wealthy and the rest of society, has proposed a challenge to corporate executives and public sector leaders to adopt a more inclusive, fair, and transparent economic system that is equipped to address the dire challenges plaguing humanity and Earth. Whoa, that's huge. The world is rich, quote, and yet the number of poor people is swelling all around us, said Pope Francis. And he's speaking to this group of, I forgot what they call themselves, the Guardian. It's like this elite, ultra-wealthy group of leaders of,
Capitalist America.
Yeah, they go into it. And he's speaking right to them. Said Pope Francis, with the increasing wealth inequality, the Pope pointed to the current challenges facing humanity. Quote, hundreds of millions of people are struggling in extreme poverty and are lacking food, housing, healthcare, schooling, electricity, and drinkable water, end quote. The response to the Pope's exhortation in business and public sector leaders formed a historic partnership with the Vatican. The Council for Exclusive Capitalism will serve as a movement to address the economic and environmental needs of the planet and its inhabitants. The council boasts over more than 10.5 trillion in assets under management, companies with over 2.1 trillion of market capitalization and 200 million workers in 163 countries. It should be noted that these extremely wealthy executives are not advisories of capitalisms, citing that the system has helped billions of people absent poverty. However, the group acknowledges that capitalism has perilously left people behind, while also taking a toll on the planet. Ultimately, the partnership calls for a moral redress. And I'll read this last paragraph and then we can talk about it. The Guardians is what they're called. As the council members are called, are top executives of the world's leading corporations who have promised to take bold actions towards creating inclusive capitalism. The Guardians will hold themselves accountable, committing to a list of intended actions involving environmental, social, and governance matters. The Guardians at their respective companies have said that they plan to hire and promote more women, increase diversity hires, commit to clean energy by purchasing 100% renewable electricity. Lottie. I mean, they're going to say a lot of other stuff too. But there was another part I wanted to read. Actually, one of the people on this I found very interesting is
it's Kushner, isn't it?
No, it's a Rothschild.
Oh.
Yeah, a Rothschild is on there. So, my red flag goes up. According to the New York Times, there are reasons to be both hopeful and skeptical of this initiative. The corporate pledges are meaningful, but some aren't new. Of course, BP, for example, restates a commitment to achieve net zero carbon emissions by 2050. Not going to happen. That announced in February. And while the council has posted the pledges publicly, there's not much to hold the companies accountable, aside from the risk of disappointing the Pope. While we applaud the people who try to make the world a better place, there is an irony that can't be ignored. The same people who are calling for an end to wealth and income inequality are extraordinarily wealthy. Of course, the noted leaders like capitalism, it's been very good to them.
All right.
So I guess my kind of question to that and response to that was, obviously it seems like capitalism lends itself as a system, at least here in the West, to unimaginable greed and wealth.
Mm-hmm.
If you think of like a Bezos, who's probably worth more than all of Latin America himself.
At least.
How can the Pope and what can his, influence, how can we rehabilitate capitalism? Can it be done?
I think anything can be done. Will it be done is a different question.
Can there be, truly concrete steps? First of all, my hat goes off to the Pope for even addressing these people. I don't even know how the person like a Pope gets an hour with these people, all these people.
I can give you a hint.
Maybe you could.
Do you know who's a recent convert to Catholicism?
Mm-mm.
Bill Gates.
He wasn't part of the meeting.
When?
What?
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
I know he's Catholic, but I didn't know he was a convert.
Yeah, he's so he has said that he is now part of the Catholic Church with his wife. Now, when you hear him speak, I will say that you can tell that he is not 100% Catholic.
No.
What does that mean? How is one 1% Catholic?
Well, I think from what I've seen from him, he is slowly trying to come over. Now, he did actually say that he believes that there is possibly, potentially, a God, and that he does believe that the values and the morals that he learns from the Catholic Church are real moral values that do need to be adhered to. Mm-hmm. So it steps in the right direction. I'm not going to say that I believe that his conversion thus far is wholehearted, but I will say I think it's a step in the right direction.
Yeah. If there is a God, he certainly better be using Windows and he needs to get vaccinated.
Sounds like he's at least getting dragged to church sometimes by Melinda. So that's what I could find.
Yeah.
Well, and Melinda.
My understanding is they send their kids to Catholic school on purpose so that they'll get Catholic education or whatever.
Yeah.
Which means they're Catholic-ish. Catholic enough.
Yeah, he did speak out on where he feels on theology, and he said that he does believe there is good potential, that there is a God, and that he said he does learn his morals with his wife from the church.
Okay.
So I thought that was a good step in the right direction.
Yeah.
I am not willing to say that I believe that he's wholeheartedly going in that direction, but
whatever. He's as Catholic as he wants to be.
And that's the thing is that you don't truly know how Catholic somebody is until everything is taken from you, right? Then you find out where your heart is. When you have nothing left, then you'll know where your heart is. I mean, if you
I wouldn't hold your breath on that one.
If you pulled all of his wealth and influence away and you left him naked at the bottom of a ravine, okay, now where is he, right?
Keith will get a kick out of this. If you left him with nothing, he'd use Apple.
Oh, here's the trouble with that statement. He couldn't afford it.
Even with all his billions, you're probably right. He'd have to skip out on the memory. That's funny. So, okay, the vehicle of capitalism has made a Gates, and let's just not, I won't just pick on Gates, but anybody like that.
Yeah.
So beyond wealthy,
yeah.
Can that be rehabilitated? Can that be changed? And to the point where leaders like that around the world are, we can have a conscious capitalism. I love the idea of conscious capitalism.
Yeah.
But is that something that can be an actuality?
If I'm to speak to one person, and mind you, the only billionaire that actually put his money in his mouth in that position was actually none other than...
Without a tax break. Go ahead.
No, he definitely gets tax breaks. Warren Buffett. He's one of the very, very few people that exemplifies what it means to have money without wanting the money. He has a 10-year-old car. He has 10-year-old suits. He lives in the same house he had when he was kids. He has the same furniture in his house that he had when his kids were young. And even his children, and this is where it speaks volumes, his children spoke up and said the only reason our father is rich is because he enjoys what he does. And then after that, they said, we will not see his money. All of his money will go to charity. Yeah. So, I mean, the fact that all of his children are on record as saying that they know that all of his funds will go to charity, that speaks volumes by itself.
It does. It does attest to him.
On top of that, though, he called his own hearing. That's how much money he has, right? He called his own hearing in Washington because he wanted to know why he only pays 3%, but his secretary pays 34%. That spoke volumes. He himself proposed that we should have more of a flat tax because he believes he should be paying as much in taxes as his secretary.
That is one of the items up for bid on the agenda of the Guardians that they had self-proposed, we just need to be taxed more. But I think, to the Pope's bigger, kind of broad question was like, when there's so much wealth in the world concentrated in so few, that's why there's so much extreme poverty.
Yes.
And that is because of the vehicle of capitalism. What can we do about that?
It's not just capitalism, though, because like you just said, if we taxed everybody at 34%, there wouldn't be as many poor people in this country as there are now. We would be more like Denmark or Norway, where we have this huge social safety net because taxes are equitable. It's not capitalism that makes you have bad taxes, it's bad politicians.
Yes.
So you think conscious capitalism is a very attainable thing?
That's fluffy terminology. I wouldn't even want to get into that, but just equitable laws will lead to more equitable society. And that doesn't really have a whole lot to do with capitalism or socialism.
Yeah. I got a data point here, like Japan. So let me back up a little bit. It sounds like the Pope is trying to strengthen the social mores of these billionaires to actually get them to engage morally with what they're doing. And Japan is a place where they have at least some elements, I think, of a moral capitalism. And my one weird data point in all this that hit me the hardest when I was there a few years ago was the prices of stadium food. They were only marked up by 5 or 10% compared to what you would get on the street or at a restaurant. actually they're probably less than the restaurant. Like there wasn't the $25 beer. The beer, number one, you can drink on just buy a beer on the street there. The beer on the street was $4, and maybe the ballpark beer was $5. And also they have a strong culture against like these just massive paychecks for these CEOs. I remember there was a comment from Reggie Fils-Aimé, the former CEO of Nintendo of America, and just talking about how he could go work for any American company and make way more money than he could as a super higher up in Nintendo. Because Nintendo, even in America, had a culture that our top leadership is only going to make so much money compared to our lowest worker. And also they have a very strong public-private partnership when it comes to healthcare and health insurance. Like they have private insurance that in a lot of ways behaves comparably or maybe even better than a lot of the social healthcare systems in Europe. So it does seem like if you're inside your culture, from the lowest levels to the highest level, there is a strong moral sense that this system doesn't work at all unless we enforce guardrails on our own. And granted, those guardrails aren't impenetrable. I mean, a lot of our democracy is based on convention or tradition, and we saw how those were getting bulldozed. But, I mean, the Pope can't change anybody's laws directly, but he can tweak the hearts of and minds of these CEOs to engage with them on the benefits to themselves and the whole world. Why it might be worth to apply some morality to their capitalism rather than just to do whatever capitalism allows.
And he can tweak the heart of a Catholic president to enact more equitable laws here in the U.S.
Absolutely.
Hopefully he does.
Yes. Yeah. No, I agree. And that's because our president is a Catholic president. Maybe not all of his policies have been.
No.
But
so Biden is Catholic. I didn't know that.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
What? Second Catholic president.
Yeah. And
was JFK the first?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I like JFK.
Yeah. And Kamala Harris actually defines herself as a Baptist Christian. She went on record as saying that. Take it for what it is.
I thought she was celebrating Kwanzaa.
I have no idea. Anyway,
A lot of Black Baptists celebrate Kwanzaa, I can tell you that.
Interesting. She's also married to a Jewish guy who celebrates Hanukkah. It's got to be interesting dinners.
That's a mishmash. So, but we can hope and pray that we can reach the Catholic heart of our president.
And there's also, I think, some importance too. There's reaching the hearts of these billionaires, like the Pope is doing. There's reaching the hearts of the president, these people in power. But it's even important for the people not in power, the common man, to have the belief that capitalism is supposed to have a moral component. A lot of you can go up to any random guy who's in a deep red district and diehard Trump supporter, and they'll tell you, how we can't have a higher minimum wage because we can't give that much money to a burger flipper. They'll spout off all these arguments that would sound out of place, maybe even for like a brutal factory manager in the early 19th century. And they willingly embrace them because of whatever political power that offers. It has me thinking back to the whole thing about those districts of the representatives that voted to overturn the election or not certify it, and how a lot there's this whitewash against maybe a decreasing wealth gap between them and minorities in their districts. But a lot of what folks aren't realizing is that the policies that would benefit minorities would benefit them. Like when you think about mass incarceration, Black and Hispanic people are incarcerated at ridiculously high rates, but guess what? White people in the U.S. are incarcerated at rates much higher than anybody in Japan or many other countries. Or healthcare. I mean, providing access to healthcare, like just improving access to healthcare in general, would touch a lot of white people in these districts that are lashing out against democracy. It would help them get healthcare.
Right.
And one of our biggest possible things that might come up, and this is getting a little bit wonky, but this is on Joe Biden's website, and it's stuff that could actually realistically pass in a 50-person Democratic majority, is just tweaking some numbers on the Affordable Care Act. I don't know if anybody here has ever shopped for insurance on the marketplace where you buy your own private insurance. Yeah, that guy, it's rough. I've done it for about 4 years. I've successfully navigated getting private insurance for a family of 6 with young children, and soon to be a family of 7. And it's kind of crazy, but
congratulations.
Some of the simple changes, like benchmarking the subsidies given for these private plans from the government, the tax credits they give you to buy plans, benchmarking them from the gold plans, which are the comprehensive plans, as opposed to the silver plans, which often have $7,000 individual and $14,000 family deductibles. Things that could bankrupt the family if they go to the hospital for one night. Just making simple changes like that. That's something that benefits white people, black people, Hispanic people in these districts. It could be a total game changer for millions of people in their health care. And all it is tweaking a number. And I don't know quite where it's going to go with that, but I guess just saying, like, in these simple things, like, that's really pro-life.
Wow, you're not kidding.
Like, when you go on the marketplace, and they actually have a little thing when you click on an insurance plan, and it tells you the cost of typical medical procedures, and you go on there, and it'll tell you what the cost of delivering a healthy baby is, like a non-complicated pregnancy. And on most of the plans on the Ohio marketplace, it's $6,000, $7,000. And can you imagine what kind of impact that has on the abortion rate? The fact that unless you have like good insurance from an employer, and guess what? Employer insurance is getting really crappy too now. You could be facing a bill that might vastly exceed the savings you have. Mm-hmm. And I'm queuing up a rant that I was accumulating over 3 or 4 different stories, so I'm not exactly sure where I make that and how it relates to what we're talking about. But just to say that getting people to believe that, like, we can have, that our capitalism can be moral by just that we're all in the same boat, and I don't know. I think that's important to get everybody on board with that.
Yeah, no, I agree. I'm with you with that on Keith for sure. I'm looking for the silver lining in the Pope doing that, because I certainly believe, from a corporate point of view, I definitely believe in a top-down approach. When I see, like, even, my wife at her bank and the companies and the people under her and all of that and how they deal with their own employees, it starts from the top. When the people at the top have some sense of humanity and care about people, instead of always, it's just business. I got to fire you. It's just business, Aaron. Yeah. You can't no longer provide for your family. When that's a huge part of our corporate makeup here in America, there's this loss of humanity within that in corporate America. And I think if the Pope can have some kind of influence from the top down at these, and these people are shaker and movers.
Yeah.
These people aren't even what I would call wealthy people here who just live among us. These are like the shaker and movers. You know what I mean? Of societies, people who influence policy for everyone. You know what I mean? And have so much influence. And so if just a drop could be changed, for me, I'm looking for the silver lining in it. I'm like, why aren't there any more evangelicals in there trying to meet with people like that?
It's a good question.
So if you get just one of those guys seriously on fire for better health care, that literally could save tens of thousands of lives every year in the U.S. Like, that's how, like, the dominoes start to fall.
Yeah.
Like, and just how a little change, like what might seem like a little change, can have such a big impact.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, I agree.
Yeah. Man.
I tip my hat to the Pope.
Yeah.
Amen. My Pope.
My Pope and yours both.
And I think, Gumby, too, you bringing that up, I think it brings up a good reason why a lot of evangelicals and Christians of all stripes pay attention to the Pope, is because I don't think there's any other equivalent leader in Christianity that can have the sway over the practical matters of how the world is run compared to the Pope. So even if, you don't share religion with him, and this even goes beyond Christians, just the religious people in general, like folks united for common good, the Pope is a really important guy to pay attention to.
Yeah, that's true.
No argument for me.
Man, tonight has been great. Any last comments from anybody? Gumby?
Really enjoyed the wine. Enjoyed the conversation. A lot to learn. Always learning. Love learning. Nothing taboo over brew.
Yeah. And Keith?
Oh man, I just spoke a ton, but I'm without words. That was an awesome episode.
And then I know, Nate, you have some things to talk about before you sign off, because you have a great initiative and some great articles. Please share.
Everybody read the Black Catholic Messenger, blackcatholicmessenger.com. We're on all the social media stuff too. But what I wanted to say was shout out to the Pope. That's all I was going to say.
Amen. And there is a newsletter coming out for the Black Catholic Messenger, right?
You can sign up for our newsletter on our website, but it's really just sending you a story here and there.
Yeah, that's how we learn.
Yeah.
Awesome. I would go ahead.
No, I said awesome.
I would also like to give a shout out to Vincent Artale Jr. So what he does is he runs Michael Heiser. Dr. Michael Heiser has appeared on our podcast a couple of times. Mm-hmm. And what he does is it's fun times.
We need him back again.
You can come in for our next one. Yeah. Dr. Michael Heiser has a group on MeWe for those people who are into alternative groups, okay, outside of Facebook. It's Dr. Michael Heiser's Biblical Approach. So if you go onto MeWe, look for that group, Dr. Michael Heiser's Biblical Approach, and it's ran by Vincent Artale Jr. He does a brilliant job, and not only does he showcase all of Dr. Michael Heiser's stuff, he also showcases people who support Dr. Michael Heiser and who have similar initiatives. Like this podcast appears inside that group as well. So he does a great job supporting all those initiatives. I want to give him a huge shout out because he does a great job.
Vincent!
So on this podcast, please check us out on Patreon or simply at anchor.fm/Bible Over Brews and on every social media platform because we're on them all. Mm-hmm. We hope to see you buying beers for us.
Give us a little love.
Yeah, just wine, bourbon. It's all love. So, thank you, everybody, and Godspeed.
Good night.
Good night.